Buon pomeriggio a tutti in questa ultima sessione del corso Global Bioethics and the UNESCO Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights del programma della licenza in bioetica, the Master in Bioethics. And so we are at the end of the course. It's a very short course. And as I told you from the very beginning, the idea of the course, it's a kind of appetizer. It's only to offer you some insights, some general ideas that can allow you to go deeper in case you need, in case you want. And this morning, we had already a first approach to the 15 principles of the UNESCO Declaration in Bioethics on Bioethics and Human Rights. And the main idea in these slides, with this difference between colors, blue and red, was to highlight how the UNESCO Declaration embraces the personalist and individualistic approach in some of the principles, but how embraces and includes also the social communitarian approach to the topics related to bioethics. In this second slide, it's exactly the same, but I have made the distinction between colors in order to analyze some of the principles and to have an approach directly to the text of the UNESCO Declaration. And I propose you to do the following. You have at hand the text of the UNESCO Declaration, and then you have your names in the 15 principles. So what do you think about, for example, for Daniel Modise, to read the article aloud and then to offer the central idea of this article, and then in the case for Daniel and for us, let's go to think about an example of a case where the text of the UNESCO Declaration might be applied, and also to offer our opinion. Oh, I think it's very nice. I think it's very thorough. I think it's very general. So what do you think about the text of the UNESCO Declaration? Okay, so, and for Daniel, let's go to open your microphone, and let's start with Article 1 of the UNESCO Declaration. The UNESCO Declaration, before the articles or the principles, have a very interesting preamble. We are not going to move to the preamble, but it's important to read it for you. And it shows the different documents that have inspired this one, on the one hand, and it establishes some general premises of the UNESCO Declaration. The preambles in the international legal instrument are not binding in general, even in a treaty are not binding, are like the preliminary, the introduction to the articles. In general, in international law, when you vote the articles and used to be voted article by article. Are the articles those that are legally binding? But we know that in the case of a declaration, a soft law, that means that the articles are not legally binding, though they have a very important ethical and political mission and message. Okay, so Anthony wanted to raise a question.
See, I didn't see my name in the student presentation.
No problem, Anthony. What is your surname? Your family name?
Anowai.
Okay.
Anowai.
Okay. It's okay. So you take the position of Carla Maria Semerano.
Okay.
Okay. Because Carla Maria and Mario and Father Mario, they didn't want to follow the course because they don't feel comfortable within an English course, as you you know, and then so you take the articles 11 to 13. Let's go to do it quickly, not in a hurry, but since we have to move on almost all the articles of the declaration. So Daniel Modis, go ahead with the first article. No, wait. It's not the first article. It's the first principle. That means Article 3 and 4. Could you read it aloud?
Professor, I'm sorry, I didn't have the declaration downloaded. I only went through it, so I only have some main idea of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I really didn't.
Yeah, but I asked you yesterday to download from the site or from internet, or even I'm not sure if it was in the also in the online material. I don't remember. But so take your time, download the UNESCO Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. If you put this in the internet, it will appear immediately.
Okay.
And then you will have time to present so the first and second principles, in other words, articles 3 and 4. So Lawrence, it's your turn for look that in this 3 to 5 principle 3 to 5, if we move to this presentation, you will see all of them in blue. And the reason why all of them are in blue is that all of them moves around a specific principle. Okay, so go ahead, Lawrence.
Article 3 is on human dignity.
No, you have to read articles, no Article 3, but it's Article 5, 6, and 7. The number you see in my slide is not the number of the article, it's the number of the principle. It's the first principle, the second, the third principle. But in the UNESCO Declaration, what is the principle? The third principle is Article 5, 6, and 7.
Okay, Article 5 is autonomy and individual responsibility.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The autonomy of persons to make decisions while taking responsibility for those decisions and respecting the autonomy of others is to be respected. For persons who are not capable of exercising autonomy, special measures are to be taken to protect their rights and interests.
Thank you. Go with Article 6.
Then Article 6 is on consent. Any preventive, diagnostic, and therapeutic medical intervention is only to be carried out with the prior, free, and informed consent of the persons concerned. Based on adequate information, the consent should, where appropriate, be expressed and may be withdrawn by the person concerned at any time and for any reason without disadvantage or prejudice. The number 2, scientific research should only be carried out with the prior, free, express, and informed consent of the persons concerned. The information should be adequate, provided in a comprehensible form, and should include modalities for withdrawal of consent. Consent may be withdrawn by the person concerned at any time and for any reason, without any disadvantage or prejudice. Exceptions to this principle should be made only in accordance with the ethical and legal standard adopted by the states, consistent with the principle and provisions set out in the Declaration. In particular, in Article 27, an international human rights law. The number 3, in appropriate cases of research carried out on a group of persons or a community, additional agreements of the legal representatives of the group or community concerned may be sought. In any case, should a collective community agreement or the consent of a community leader or other authority substitute for an individual's informed consent.
Go ahead.
Article 7. Article 7 is on persons without the capacity to consent. In accordance with the domestic law, special protection is to be given to the persons who do not have the capacity to consent. Authorization for research and medical practice should be obtained in accordance with the best interest of the person concerned and in accordance with the domestic law. However, the person concerned should be involved to the greatest extent possible in the decision-making process of consent, as well as that of withdrawing consent. B, research should only be carried out for his or her direct health benefit subject to the authorization of the protective condition prescribed by law. And if there is no research alternative of comparable effectiveness with research participants able to consent, research which does not have potential direct health benefit should only be undertaken by way of exception with the utmost restraint, exposing the person only to be minimal risk and minimal burden. And if the research is expected to contribute to the health benefit of other persons in the same category, subject to the conditions prescribed by law and compatible with the protection of the individual's human rights, refusal of such persons to take part in research should be respected.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Very clear reading. Could you tell us, for example, from Article 5, and I will ask also the other participants in the course. So what is the main issue of these 3 articles?
I see a kind of principle of subsidiarity being exposed here, whereby one's autonomy should be respected and no one should be taken for granted.
And when we are talking about autonomy, what is the human right that is at stake?
I see a situation whereby one's ability to perform should be respected and one should not be taken for granted because maybe one is not able. Take, for instance, the article that is talking about inability for one to consent over anything. It should not be taken for granted just because the person is not able to do anything, but then that person should be respected in all totality.
Yes, because of his or her dignity,
Dignity and
the
right.
person has to be respected.
Yes.
And what is the fundamental good that when we talk about person without the capacity to consent, what is the fundamental good that he or she has in a limited way?
Now, I see these people as people who are vulnerable in some way.
Of course,
Yes, certainly.
they will enter in the category also of vulnerable people.
Yes.
Okay.
So I see a reason where no matter the situation, the human person should be respected.
Yeah.
No matter the situation, the human person should be respected. Allow the person to exercise his or her rights to the not to the detriment of his own career or whatever. The person should be respected in all totality because he is a human being.
Thank you, Lawrence. Is anyone that can help me to find the right, so the precise answer? Because what Lawrence mentioned, it's correct. But when we are talking about bioethics and human rights, we know that human rights are these kind of things, valuable things we have humans that should be respected, protected, promoted. But in these three articles, we are not talking about the right to life, isn't it? What is the right that is at stake when we are promoting or guaranteeing the autonomy? What does it mean, autonomy?
Ability for someone to make decisions.
Yes, and when we take decisions, it's because we are
the right to freedom.
Bravo, the fundamental good that is at stake when we are talking about autonomy is freedom, the capacity to take decisions, informed decisions. And this is a process that requires, on the one hand, sufficient information so that I can decide if I accept a medical treatment, if I accept to participate in an experimentation. And the reason why there are some people unable to offer a valid consent is because they have a limited capacity of taking decisions by themselves, like a minor or a children. You cannot offer him, hey, guy, hey, let's go to play experimentation. Come here, we are going to play, and you include a kid or a children in a child in an experimentation. This is wrong. Or someone that has a mental disorder, that has been even legally inhabilitated to buy things, to sell their own things, because he or she has not the capacity of acting freely. His or her capacity of understanding in order to take decisions is limited. And this is exactly what Articles 3, 4, and 5 tries to highlight. And could you raise, you Lawrence, or also the others, could you, in this article, we find a specific reference to the informed consent. Informed consent it shouldn't be only a form that I have to sign. For example, when I take the vaccine, I have to sign an informed consent in which I received sufficient information. And then I accept and I signed the informed consent. And these three articles are talking about two different contexts. One, when we are going to participate in a research or experimentation. And then we have also in the context of a medical treatment, are different concepts and different conditions. What do you think about, what is the difference you find in Articles 5, 6, and 7 between the context of a therapeutic intervention and that you find in Article 6.1, paragraph 1, and when we are talking about scientific research, about informed consent in the context of a clinical trial? Could you give me some remarks or?
I see it that there should be, it should not act as an imposition on any individual. That is, don't conduct any research on any individual without the information of the, without informing the person that you are embarking on. Don't just impose anything on anybody, but let there be freedom on the part of the person to accept to be used in any way.
If you, thank you, Lawrence. You also can see that in both contexts, informed consent entails not only the possibility of accepting to participate in a treatment or in a research, but also to leave open always the possibility of refusal, to refuse a treatment or to quit from a research that I accepted at the beginning. I offered my consent, but at a certain point, for reasons that I don't need to give a motivation to quit, to exit from a research. This is a risk that the people responsible of clinical trials, they invite the people to participate in a clinical trial, but they cannot say, hey, since you accepted at the beginning to participate in the clinical trial, then it's mandatory for you to continue with this clinical trial. No. From an ethical point of view, and this is not exclusive of the UNESCO declaration, in biomedical research, participants can abandon the clinical trial anytime with without no explanation for personal or private reasons. They can quit from the research. And then, so the organizer of the clinical trial will find other participants that will continue the research. And look, what do you think about the paragraph 3 of Article 6? This is something quite innovative in the international texts about bioethics. Paragraph 3.
Yeah, I see the presence of the legal system also being involved there.
Yes, but remember that I mentioned that one of the characteristics of global bioethics that is not focused mainly in the individual, but that takes into consideration a communitarian.
It's communitarian principles also.
And so, according to the Western understanding of autonomy, with an individual or individualistic approach, it's necessary only the approval of the person, of the individual. Is an individualistic consent, but the UNESCO chair that embraces a broader vision realizes that there are cultures where the individual has to be accompanied in taking some important decisions, like to participate in a research or to receive a medical treatment supported by his or her own community, family, tribe, and it's the praxis. Look, here you can see how the UNESCO declaration tries to balance the individualistic and communitarian
Yeah, the two go together.
And I think this is an important, for example, contribution of the UNESCO in the concept of informed consent in a more communitarian and culturally adapted concept of informed consent. Okay? Okay, so let's go to move right now to read articles 8.
3 and 4.
Oh, there's some comments. Okay. Let's move to Article 8 and Article 9. Felix.
Article 8. Respect for human vulnerability and personal integrity. In applying and advancing scientific knowledge, medical practice, and associated technologies, human vulnerability should be taken into account. Individuals and groups of special vulnerability should be protected and the personal integrity of such individuals respected. Article 9. Privacy and confidentiality. The privacy of the persons concerned and the confidentiality of their personal information should be respected to the greatest extent possible. Such information should not be used or disclosed for purposes other than those for which it was collected or consented to, consistent with international law, in particular international human rights law.
Thank you very much, Felix. What do you think, Felix, about these principles? Are two different principles. These in my slides are in a different color because they are not like the three previous principles that are correlated around autonomy. What is the core idea of Article 8?
The core idea of Article 8 is the integrity of the human person
Mm-hmm.
and equality. You see. Not non-discrimination of vulnerable persons, protection of vulnerable persons in the process
Yeah,
of
it's the
research.
protection of, so it's the concept and the reality of vulnerable people. What does it mean, vulnerable people? This is part of the slides that I will present later. But in general, the UNESCO declaration mentioned, so of course that peoples in the principle number 5, incapable of expressing their consent, they are vulnerable by nature, I would say. But they are other vulnerabilities. There are other vulnerabilities. We mentioned, and we will go more in detail if we have time. If not, it is in the slides and it is in the documents that I uploaded for you in the Materiali online of the course. There are other categories of vulnerable people. In general, all human beings are vulnerable because of our natural contingency. But there are some people that are in a position of vulnerability because they don't have the capacity to flourish by themselves, to assure that his or her rights or their rights are saved or protected. And we mentioned some examples. For example, people that are in the prison. Imagine that in jail, you propose a clinical trial and experimentation for the good of the interns, for the good of the inmates, for specific pathologies, and it's something good, But why do you think that inmates in the prison are vulnerable when they receive a proposal to participate as volunteers, freedom, as volunteers in a clinical trial? Because all people participating in a clinical trial should be volunteers, freely informed consent. But what can happen in depression when I offer to participate all the inmates in a clinical trial? That they, because of their particular situation, they can feel forced to participate. Or they can think that his or her refusal to participate in a clinical trial will have bad consequences for his or her. So look that in this case, the inmates in the prisons have full capacity of consent, full capacity of taking decisions, but his or her vulnerability comes for the special situation of being in prison. But on the other hand, there some research that should be, and it's good for people in prison to be carried out, that cannot, in some cases, carry out this clinical trial outside the context of the prison. And it's in these cases where this specific vulnerability should be taken into consideration to protect them more, not less, to protect them more. Or imagine another important case of vulnerability, people that are in a conditions of illiteracy. You invite people that have a very low level of culture, poor people, illiterate people, that because of their social condition, they might accept to participate in a clinical trial, even though they don't have a full knowledge of what is going to happen in the research. In that case, poor or illiterate people are in a special condition of vulnerability. They are not people that do not have the capacity to consent, as in the case of minors or people with mental disorders. This is very clear, and they are already protected by the principle number 5 that Lawrence read before. But in the case of poor, illiterate people in prison, they are not protected by that article because they have the full capacity of consent. The problem or the challenge in that case, in those cases, is that they can be somehow conditioned by their social or cultural status. Okay. And what about the article 9? Article 9, what is the core of this article?
Professor,
Yes.
talking about the vulnerable, can we also consider the people with disability, disabled people? You know, because I also think they are also vulnerable because we're thinking we can do anything that we like with disabled people. I mean,
Of course, Modis. So the list of vulnerabilities is not a closed list. Okay. Actually, I didn't mention as an example, for example, also pregnant women. Pregnant women are in the category of vulnerable people, not because they are women, because they have full capacity to take decisions and to be informed, and no problem at all. But the fact of being in the period of pregnancy make her and the baby to have a special attention. And when we are talking about vulnerable population, or vulnerable people, we have to add some additional protection. This is the scope of this principle. It's when you realize that this person, it's vulnerable, it's disabled, it's in prison. In this specific situation or contexts, the declaration is not telling you, do not take care, do not invite to research, because sometimes they will need, for example, medical attention, medical care. And you cannot say, oh, because you are pregnant, I cannot take care of you. It's exactly the opposite. It's, I'm going to take all the normal care measures, but in addition to that, I realize that you deserve a more detailed, more yeah, to take care in a more specific way because your condition of disabled or poor or illiterate. And I cannot say, oh, because you are illiterate, so better, I will choose another patient for the clinical trial. No, I'm going to welcome you. And since I realize you have problems of understanding or you don't have a specific culture, I will try to explain you, devoting more time, more attention, more care. And this is the spirit of the principle of the respect and the protection of humans in this special situation of vulnerability.
Excuse me.
Yep.
I do not know whether this is where safeguarding of minors, where they belong, talking about this vulnerability.
Because minors usually, from a legal point of view, they are considered persons incapable of expressing their consent.
Perfect.
Okay. There is also the debate in the praxis about what is called, I'm not sure in English, it's the il minore maturo, so the mature minor, that is like an adolescent. Adolescent means that 13, 14, 15 years, they don't have the legal age to give valid consent from a legal point of view. But in the medical practice, they can also, of course, give their opinions, and their opinions, even though they are minors, 13, 14, 15, legally speaking, should be taken into consideration. But look, that this is in the context of the medical practice, because a minor cannot buy a house or a car, and this selling of a car or buying a car is legally speaking invalid. But in the context of the medical care, in the current practice, it's not the legal age, the legal it's majority, you say in English, I'm not sure. The legal, it's not the legal age, it's more the reality about the capacity of understanding and taking decisions, that in the case of an adolescent in the 14 years, 15 years, 16 years, is not only their legal representative of their parents, those who decide if you are going to go to a surgery, for example, or to participate in a clinical trial. It's not the parents alone. the legal representatives alone. The minor, mature, should be consulted. And especially it's not in the UNESCO declaration, but it's in for example, in the Oviedo Convention, in the Council of Europe. If a minor refuses to participate to participate, even though the research might be for his or her benefit, the promoter of the clinical trial shouldn't accept.
Really?
Only with the approval of the parent.
Wow.
If the minor refuses explicitly because he or she doesn't want to be injected to take some blood, some biological material, he or she fears these kind of things that is necessary in the clinical trial, at the level of the Council of Europe, we have a regulation that says stop, even though it would be for he or in his or her good interests. Okay. Okay, let's go to privacy. Privacy. What do we have about privacy? Who can tell me why privacy, the right to privacy, it's something that related to bioethics? In what situations we can feel our confidentiality or our privacy might be challenged, and then that my right to privacy should be at risk.
I think for me, in the area of genetic information, the genetic information of everyone is private, and it cannot be accessed without the person's consent or make open the genetic information of anybody. For me, that is where I see the right to privacy playing role in bioethics.
Mm-hmm.
I see also the health condition of a particular person. A medical doctor is not supposed to expose the health condition of a particular person to any other person. It is meant for that person alone.
Yeah. So there's some...
Again, for me, I think also like phone calls, accessing somebody's phone, or those, even though in some extreme cases like criminality, it can be accessed, but ordinarily, the diary phone of some information, somebody's information in his cell phone and is private and cannot be accessed by anybody without the person's consent.
Yeah. And of course, in addition to this genetic information or our biological material, imagine that I go to an experimentation on a medical treatment and they took my blood or take my some biopsy of some parts of my skin. All these contains personal genetic information. It's biological material. And also the general information about my name, my phone, my house, my address, my email. All these are informations that in the clinical practice or in the research context, I need to provide to the medical doctor or to the researcher. But when I provide this information, it's an information that I have given with this specific purpose. it's not something that should be publicized in a scientific article or in the press. And then go to the Corriere della Sera and I read that Professor Alberto Garcia from the UNESCO chair in Bioethics and Human Rights has a predisposition to Alzheimer according to the recent medical treatment he received at San Camilo Hospital. And by studying his blood, we have discovered that he has this predisposition to Alzheimer and the risk of cancer. Wow. No. If I went to the hospital to receive a treatment and they took my blood, was for this specific purpose, a therapeutic purpose. And then this is a secret, a confidential information. I can authorize the medical doctor or the researcher to open this information to the public, but he or she needs my approval and to explain me the reasons why it's good, it's convenient to give or to open the information to the public, because otherwise, from an ethical point of view, most of the research that that in the clinical trials, you don't need to know if the blood is from Alberto or from Felix or from Lawrence. You need the biological material, and then you need to trace the individuals in case you have to communicate something. But it is not necessary to disclaim or to open all the information, except they ask you the permission to do it. Okay. Okay, let's go to move ahead to the principle of equality, justice, and equity. And in this case, our official reader is Leonard. Go ahead, Leonard.
Article number, I don't remember.
It's Article 10, 11. 10 and 11.
11. Okay. Equality. Okay. Article number 10. Equality, justice, and equity. The fundamental equality of all human beings in dignity and rights is to be respected so that they are treated justly and equitably. Article number 11, non-discrimination and non-stigmatization. No individual or group should be discriminated against or stigmatized on any grounds in violation of human dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
Should I continue?
So, Leonard, what do you think about these two articles? Do you like them? What do you think about?
They are very beautiful. They are very beautiful, written on the paper. Then, the principle, it relates to equality of everybody, irrespective of color, race, or origin. And the dignity of everybody is equal and must be respected in every angle of life, in every engagement, in dialogue, in discussion, in whatever that is done in the society, especially in treatment, of people in hospital. For instance, if somebody is sick, there should be no preference in treating the person. Maybe we go to hospital, the hospital will give preference for somebody because of his place of origin. This should be avoided. That's what then in justice, using justice, let me bring it to practical. In distribution of common goods, let me say, in goods, it should be done in a way that everybody receives what is due to him or her. Every nation receives what is due to them in every distribution. That is the one of principle of justice. Mm-hmm. Then the principle of equity. I think equity would come in applying the principle, not that equity does not mean everybody will receive 100. For instance, if we are distributing vaccines now, we say there is 19 regions in Italy. Here, we distribute 100 cartons to every region. In this way, we maintain equity. This is not equity. Equity takes consideration other factors. For instance, if the population of Lazio is 2 million, and the population of Napoli or Sicilia is 10 million, equity demands you give more to Sicilia than Lazio. Not because they are, you say equity, you give Lazio that is 2 million, you give them 5 million and give also Napoli 5 million. Since 5 million, everybody serves 5 million. This is not equity. Equity, you distribute according to what is certain factors, what is available. This is the principle of equity in place. Then the respect for cultural diversity and pluralism. That is article non-discrimination and non-stigmatization. Based against this should on the grounds of violation of human dignity. Let me use a typical example. Let me use somebody well, let me say those that are mentally malatia mental, those that have mental diseases, to the mental illness, that are because of their mental states, they are abandoned, they are discriminated, their rights are violated. This is discrimination based on their health condition. Maybe when somebody goes to clinic and it was discovered that he has a genetic problem, because of that, he is stigmatized or given less attention because of the genetic information. This is violation of his dignity and their rights, and such a stigmatization should not be encouraged. I think that is the little I know about, I can say about this.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Actually, the two principles in my slides are in the same color, in black, because both are correlated. At the very end, the principle or at the basis of these two principles, it's the recognitions that all humans are equal. We know that there are people that have different color, different language, different amount of money, and there is also differences. But at the essential point of view, humans are equal, should be equal. And look at in the case of justice and equity, for me, it's sometimes difficult to understand the difference between both. Justice is more clear because justice is the virtue of giving everyone his or her own right. And then, as I explained in my course of Introduction to Law and Philosophy of Law, justice, it's a virtue that correlates to the right of others. And that means that if Leonard has the right to life, Alberto has the duty of justice of not to kill Leonard. This is the two faces of the same coin, okay? But in the case of equity, what is exactly equity? It's very subtle, but it's very nice. Why? And I use this example. If I work for the Athenaeum, I receive a salary, $1,000 a month. But I'm single. I'm a consecrated person. And what is just for the Athenaeum, it's to pay me the salary of a professor. But what about if the Athenaeum, instead of paying me, for me, they pay me 1,000, but for a professor that is married and has 3, 4 children, the Athenaeum decides to give him or her, instead of 1,000 for the same work, 1,100 or 1,200. It is not a matter of justice, because according to justice, what this professor or myself deserve, but the number of hours and for my contract, it's 1,000. But in the specific situation of this professor, equity, not justice. For justice, he or she received 1,000, but this plus, it's something that is not mandatory for the Athenaeum to do, but it's a matter of equity. To support, according to the specific situation of this professor, to support more, economically speaking. But this principle of equity might be also applied, this is the suggestion of the UNESCO declaration, also in topics related to bioethics, in which the relation or the decisions of doctors or researchers, they are invited not only to be fair and just and to respect the rights of the people, but to go beyond, using equity that is not binding or mandatory as the duties we have of justice, okay? And this is something in part similar when we will read the articles related to solidarity, that are quite similar. But now let's go, if you don't have any other comments about these articles 10 and 11, let's move to the respect of cultural diversity and pluralism, and the following articles by Leonard.
Anthony.
I should continue. I just finished reading.
Sorry?
It's Anthony.
Who?
Anthony.
It should.
It should be Anthony.
Yes.
No, but Leonard has not Oh no, in the present, in my slide, now is the turn. What? Hey?
Leonard has taken.
I am sorry, yeah.
He has taken.
You good, go
just-
ahead.
Okay.
Okay, Article 12.
Mhm.
Respect for cultural diversity and pluralism. The importance of cultural diversity and pluralism should be given due regard. However, such considerations are not to be invoked to infringe upon human dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedom, nor upon the principles set out in this declaration, nor to limit their scope. Article 13, solidarity and cooperation. Solidarity among human beings and international cooperation towards that end are to be encouraged.
Okay. What do you think about this
Yeah,
articles, Anthony?
yeah. Article 12, respect for cultural diversity and pluralism. I would say that cultural diversity and having a pluralistic society is a reality of human existence. That is the fact that we speak different languages, that we eat different foods, that we worship, even in religion. It is, we cannot fail to recognize this fact. For example, let me use Nigeria as an example. In Nigeria alone, we have up to 250 tribes, and each has its own language and mode of dressing and eating, but religion may overlap. But here in this article, there's something that is also as a note that should be taken. That is, in the reality of this cultural diversity and pluralism, each culture or language or whatever should try also to respect these fundamental human rights, human dignity, human rights, and human freedoms. For example, let me take Islam as an example. Now, if we are respecting the religion of Islam, that does not give them the audacity in order to infringe on other people's fundamental human rights. For example, the right to life or the right to worship, freedom of worship. You say that everybody has to become Muslim or everybody has to worship together with you. It is an infringement on other people's fundamental rights. Then on Article 13, solidarity and cooperation. Solidarity and cooperation among human beings. This is taking the words of Aristotle that man is a social being. So we are not animals, we are social beings. That is, we are in need of one another. We talk about transcendence, the human transcendence, that is not only towards God, but towards our fellow human beings. We are in need of each other. For example, solidarity will be more evident if in a situation whereby a country is suffering, and then another country, to show that cooperation and solidarity among human beings, they are obliged to lend a helping hand to that country that is suffering, to assist them in order to combat, to challenge whatever that is facing that country, because all of us are the same human beings living in the same world. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Someone would like to make some comments about these two principles, the one of cultural diversity. It's, let me only to show you in the slides that I prepared for the course, but we don't have time to develop. You will find some ideas about the protection of vulnerable populations, about what is vulnerability in bioethics, who are vulnerable. This is something we have already discussed. And you will have this material for you available that we cannot go in details. And in the last part of the presentation, you have already in the Materiali online, you will find also this, the presentation with these slides, okay? Since the course is so short, so brief, we couldn't develop this or comment these ideas, but this can be helpful for you. And I wanted to develop a little bit more about the cultural diversity and how it's important and why it's important in the medical and the research and the environmental issues in bioethics to take into consideration the respect of this cultural diversity and pluralism. And by commenting the article that Anthony read, to raise some of the controversies about the role of people of religious convictions in bioethics, but taking into consideration the importance that people with religious convictions should participate in a democratic political organizations at national and international level, and how we can give a contribution to global bioethics and to bioethics in general by participating. And this is something you will find in the presentation. But I go back to conclude the course, but before concluding, I want to listen also Daniel Modis and help us, Daniel, to read the first and the second principle, in other words, Article 3 and 4 of the UNESCO Declaration.
Okay, thanks a lot, Professor. I think Article 3 is human dignity and human rights. It's something that is very close to my heart. And it says here, human dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms are to be fully respected. The interest and welfare of the individual should have priority over sole interest of science or society. And then we go into Article 4 about benefit and harm. In applying and advancing scientific knowledge, medical practice and associated technologies, direct and indirect benefits to patients, research participants, and other affected individuals should be maximized, and any possible harm to such individuals should be minimized. Right.
Thank you very much, Modis. Yeah.
Good. Going back to Article 3, which is about human dignity and human rights, I think for me it is quite clear, because human beings in their nature should be given a sense of decorum, should be given a sense of dignity. I mean, we should know that everyone has got human rights and fundamental rights or fundamental freedom, and that's why we bring in issues like, for instance, the right to life, because that's one fundamental right that everyone has. And by respecting, for instance, before we go to human dignity, there should be life before dignity. So it, by virtue of being a human person who is alive, you are automatically, you should be afforded the human dignity and all these human rights and the fundamental freedom, where we have all that I have also explained. And the interest and welfare of the individual should have priority over the sole interest of science or society, of science or society. like for instance, it is going to be complemented by a benefit and harm, where we're going to talk about research and everything when using patients. For instance, we cannot put science, above the individual himself. It is not allowed that when we want to achieve something scientifically, we use a human person for the benefit of science, but we should use science for the benefit of the human person. I think that's basically what they are trying to say there. We should use science for the benefit of an individual and for the benefit of a society, not vice versa.
Mhm.
Right. And then benefit and harm. I think they, like I've said, they complement one another. In applying and advancing scientific knowledge, medical practice and associated technologies, direct and indirect benefits to patients, research participants, and other affected individuals should be maximized.
Mhm.
And any possible harm to such individual should be minimized. I
Yeah.
think that's basically what I've already explained, that they complement one another. We cannot use science to harm people, but we should use science to alleviate harm in the people.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Maurice. These two articles that are at the beginning are in the section that is more focused on the individual. That's why when you are pondering in the scales, this is the priority of the individual, and but we cannot criticize the declaration because it is very individualistic, because we have studied that the UNESCO declaration should be understood as a whole. And at a certain point, the emphasis is in the person, in the individual, in respect of science and technology. In the case of the protection, the Article 4, it's the utilitarian or the utilitaristic philosophy, because you have to maximize benefits, minimize harms and risks. But it doesn't mean that the UNESCO declaration is an utilitarian philosophy, because it has, I would say, it embraces different visions and different principles that are reasonable. So if you discern about the articles and the principles we have studied during this course, you realize that they are reasonable, they are sensitive, they are carefully established in order to offer the, the international community, the governments, the professionals of health, research, to the businesses, environment, for the protection of the environment, and the families, and the whole pyramid of this society. We have we had the opportunity to take a look to this roadmap of the global bioethics. In the course that now we are going to finish, we have made an overview of the different aspects. You will find in the presentation, in the last presentation, some more specific topics related to some of the principles, and we have to finish. You will find in the materiali online, you have the syllabus, you have the presentations, and you have the assignment. in this course, we are not going to do an exam. It's an optional course, but you have to write an assignment that you will find the guidelines in the Moodle. Basically, is take one of the cases that I mentioned at the beginning of the course, and then trying to make a reflection about the case, specific case, in the light of these 15 principles, universal principles, and how you think the principle of solidarity affects this specific case, or the respect of human dignity, or the protection of vulnerable people. You can choose one case. Read the case, and in the light of what we have been discussing during the classes and your readings, in case you want to read more, you will find in Materiali Online also in the book of Ten Half, or he coordinated, if you want to go more in detail to some of the principles. Okay?
Excuse me, Professor.
I would like also if you can give me some feedback about this course. This is the first time that I offer the course in English. And if you think that there's something that can be helpful for the future, for future participants, do not hesitate to tell me right now, or if you send me an email, I will appreciate it.
Excuse me, Professor.
Yeah, Lawrence.
Actually, thank you so much for this opportunity, because this course has exposed us to so many things. There are so many things that were vague in my memory. But with this course, I want to tell you sincerely that I'm able to understand so much on this UNESCO, which I was ignorant of. Now, my question is, recently we hear women talk about feminism. They're trying to project themselves. I don't know whether that falls under the 10 principle when he's talking about equality.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where they belong when women talk about equality, that are the same, like they should be treated the same way as men, and so on and so forth? Or is it that they have gone to the extreme of emphasizing so much? Or should one place them under this Article 10 that is talking about equality?
Yeah, it's the principle of the equality and justice and non-discrimination. Most of the claims of the feminist movement is that in similar situations, men and women are not treated with justice. And this is legitimate. This is legitimate. And on the other hand, there is also the risk and the reality of very radical feminist movements that their vision, and I don't think this is the Christian vision, radical feminist uses to create a kind of battle, opposition between men and women. It's only between men and women. It's not between women and homosexuals, lesbians, queers, meers, preers, all these kinds of genders.
Yes.
It's only against men. But
Yeah,
this is also a discrimination.
of course.
If you are going to oppose, you have to oppose not only to the males, you have to oppose to all the genders that are not women. This is, I'm cheating, but it is true. So it is true that when radical feminism presents or claims the men in general from an anthropological point of view like an enemy of women, I don't think this is this is not an balanced view of the complementary relation between men and women. And we have to fight against discrimination. And we need to empower women where it's just to do it. And we have to avoid, I don't know, masculismo, machismo. So the superiority of men over women. That is present in a lot of cultures. In the past, in Spain, also in Europe, now it's a different thing. But in Latin America, there's a lot of machismo. And I guess that in many countries of Africa, there's a lot of machismo. And we have to evangelize this, where the culture, it's using women, not taking into consideration the precious role they have in the society, in the family. We have to fight. We should support people trying to respect the equal condition of men and women, and then to recognize that for same work, from same capacities, they should be treated equally as men. Otherwise, this is a source of indiscrimination. That means it's an unjustified difference, an unjustified difference. In the case that I suggested you about Professor Garcia's salary, I received 1,000. And this is fair, it's my contract. I accepted to work. And then I received 1,000. But if my colleague received 1,100, and this plus, it's due to equity. It is not that I'm discriminated, that I'm not receiving what is just, and it will be a discrimination between this professor and me. No, because the difference of treatment is justified by equity, because the other professor has more needs to live, to survive than me. And on the other hand, because the relation is contractual and I accepted to work receiving 1,000. It's like the gospel. Now remember that episode of the gospel in which Jesus goes through the streets. It's a parable. It was collecting people to work in the vineyard. And it takes one at 9 a.m. and one at 11 a.m. And then at the end in the afternoon, he called another one. And at the end of the journey, the owner of the land started to pay. And he paid the last one 1 dinar. And it paid to the second 1 dinar. And it paid to the first 1 dinar. And the first one said, oh, wow, this is unfair. We have supported the heavy song during the day, and you paid us 1 dinar. And the last one that was working only 1 hour, he received 1 dinar also. And the owner said, hey, my friend, I'm not cheating you. We agree in 1 dinar. take your money. Or are you going to be sad because I'm good? I'm a good person and I can help the last one? So look at the difference between justice and equity. And that's why we shouldn't, in treatment the people, we have to consider our own dignity and the equal value of people, but it's impossible. We should adapt also to the special conditions of the people when we realize or they are vulnerable or they deserve or they need more due to their special conditions. Because yes, we are all equal, but not all of us have the same needs or the same, the same needs. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Keep in contact. Get into the material online to take a look when after the intensive week. I will write in there is no a deadline for the assignment, but I will write you the deadline that will be probably by the, I don't remember if I need to do before summer or after summer. I have to when you will finish your program?
Should be in June.
In June. So probably
Yes.
the best thing will be to, by middle of May would be a good deadline for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
No.
Middle of May,
It's
maybe ending of May.
Ending of May.
Let's make it first week of June.
And middle of May.
No.
No.
Ending of May.
Ending of May.
Okay, the end of May. Okay, no problem. Okay, let's put then the 31. It's I'm not sure what day of the week is. May the 31st. Let me see.
May is next month. So,
It's a Monday. It's a Monday. So May the Monday.
Let it be on June.
Monday.
Let it be on
May
June.
31 is the deadline for assignment. I think you will have to devote 5, no more than 6-7 hours. Okay, that is usually in these courses. If the course is like 5 hours, you should have an assignment of 10 hours because of the credits you will receive from this course. That is 1 credit. And but I think that you can do it using the materials you have at hand. In 6-8 hours you can do it, and you can send it uploading in the
Model.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Excuse me.
And go ahead
Thank
in
you,
your
sir.
intensive week.
I couldn't find the course in
Yes, you have
the
to,
material online. I don't.
Anthony, you have to put in contact with Gennaro Casa for to register in the course, because the reason why you are not in the slide with the names is because in the official list of the registered students, you were not there. So please contact Gennaro so that he can activate also your access to the Moodle the materiali online, and then okay.
Okay, Professor, and the other thing, the length of the assignment. How long do you want us the length of the assignment?
You have
how many pages?
You have
how many pages?
You have all the very detailed guidelines in the instructions of the guidelines. And if you have any doubt after reading the guidelines, you can write me and I will clarify. But I think it's quite clear.
Okay, thanks a lot, Professor.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Always.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much. It has been wonderful listening to you.
Bye-bye.
You did wonderfully well.